Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Urbana City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bowersox?
Here.
Mr. Garrett?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Miss Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe? Miss Stevenson?
Present.
Mayor Pressing?
Here. The first item is approval of the minutes of October 19th.
So moved.
Motion by Lewis, seconded by Gehrig. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, no additions. Anyone like to talk with the City Council? We're at petitions and communications. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the council? Apparently not.
I have one announcement.
Yes, Diane.
I have an announcement. I wanted to let the public know that Ameren IP is going to be hosting, at our urging, an open house on Tuesday, November 10th, from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Stone Creek Church, which is at the corner of Race Street and Windsor Road. And we asked for this meeting to be set up to address residents' concerns about power outages in South Urbana. The area of concern is bounded by Race Street on the west, Windsor Road on the south, Philo Road on the east, and Florida Avenue on the north. And this is an open house format. Representatives from the power company will be available to answer questions and give residents a chance to find out why outages are happening and what the power company intends to do about them. And we invite all to attend. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. I don't believe we have any old business. Reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole.
We had a discussion about ordinance number 2009-10-116, an ordinance amending the Urbana Local Traffic Code and the schedule of fines pursuant to Section 110J of the Urbana City Code involving increasing meter restricted and prohibited fines. But we have, in the meantime, received an amended text. And Delora, would you like to let us know what the changes are?
There were a couple changes. One was when legal reviewed the format of the ordinance, they wanted to remove the part about resetting the fines every August 1st. They determined that it wasn't really a fine, it was more of an administrative decision we'd made to reset, and so they wanted that removed and put in our administrative manual that we have. So I took that out. Another thing was we needed to add and subsequent tickets to the third level fines. That was kind of left off of there. And then the last thing was when going through the traffic code ordinance, there was lots of references to the 72 hours that had to be removed, and that made for some renumbering and removal of fine amounts that didn't need to be in there anymore that were in the schedule. So it was a lot of strikeout and not much add, but it was a lot of correcting to do.
Thank you.
In that case, I'd like to, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to move ordinance number 2009-10-116 as amended, an ordinance amending pretty much the same thing I just said about 2 seconds ago.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Gehrig, second by Roberts. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Miss Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Miss Stevenson?
No.
Okay, that motion carries. We don't have reports of special committees. Reports of officers. Tom Carino, Economic Development Director.
Good evening. This afternoon, I sent an electronic copy of the monthly economic development report. Just hitting some highlights, we had a very active month for ribbon cuttings. Not all of these businesses necessarily open this month, but ribbon cuttings were pretty active this month. We did a ribbon cutting for Parkinson and Burns, which relocated to 123 West Main Street. We did a ribbon cutting for Comfort Suites on North Lincoln Avenue. We had a ribbon cutting at Wines at the Pines at Stone Creek Commons. We had a ribbon cutting for La Fiesta at Sunnycrest Mall, and a ribbon cutting for Po' Boys on South High Cross Road. As far as other events this month, there was the final art workshop at the Market at the Square, organized by Anna Hochhalter. It's estimated that we had almost 1,000 attendees for 6 workshops over the course of the market. A great job of positive exposure at relatively little cost, again, organized by Anna Hochhalter. We were awarded a grant for the Market at the Square this month. It was a great proposal called Eat Here, done by Lisa Braltz. The grant request was for $10,000, and the state granted us $15,000. So we actually received more than the initial request because of the proposal. And basically what the proposal is, the state was looking for programs that they could replicate statewide. And so they were looking for local expertise for grant proposals to help create statewide programs. And this program is a program where we're going to promote the Market at the Square as a weekly stop on your shopping list. So if you need groceries, don't just go to the grocery store, but come to the Market at the Square as a regular stop on your grocery list. So that's a program that Lisa's going to be organizing and is going to be, we're going to be advertising that over the course of the next market season. And then Ryan Breaux and I attended the ICSC Retail Deal-Making Show in Chicago. Activity was a little slow as far as retailers looking for space, but it was a great opportunity to cultivate some relationships, make contacts, and was a successful show. We'll have to see if there are any inducements to retailers to come here, as that success is kind of down the road. But as far as making contacts and networking, it was a great success. So that's all I have. Unless anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you. And I think Libby has a report as well.
Okay, Libby Tyler, Director of Community Development.
I have an announcement. This is for a public workshop this Saturday morning, 9:30 to 12:30, and this will be at the Krannert Center Festival foyer. The topic is a Green Corridors project that the MTD is doing in conjunction with some students in urban and regional planning and with the city, and it looks at making Springfield Avenue in Urbana and White Street in Champaign more environmentally sustainable corridors in the future. And we sent out a press release with the students. They're going to be using some different types of techniques, including storytelling, on the workshop. So that's this Saturday morning, November 7th, 9:30 to 12:30 at the Krannert Center Festival foyer. Thank you.
I'd like to say that we're planning a joint study session with the City of Champaign and Champaign County on video gambling. This is going to be on November 12th, which is a Thursday, and it'll be held at the Beckman Institute from 7 to 9, and we're putting together the agenda. So if you have questions or topics that you'd like to see addressed, please let me know. And we also met with Carl Hospital today. They're going to have a public hearing in this room on Wednesday, starting at 10. And Mike Munson has written up a very good description of the meeting. This is going to be, if you read a very good article in the News Gazette by Debbie Pressey on Sunday. We want Carl to do the best that they can, obviously, because they're a huge employer and a major taxpayer. We are concerned that if some court case gets decided against the cities, that we would end up with the Urbana taxpayers picking up the cost of all the increased charitable care that's going to take place. But I'm very happy to say that Carl recognizes this problem, and what we talked about was we can't really give our stamp of approval to the project until we have an agreement on what might have to be payments in lieu of taxes, because we do provide all kinds of services, fire and police, and of course all the streets. I think we spent almost $1 million on the traffic signal. So I think we'll be able to work something out. But the hearing's going to be held on Wednesday. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to new business. We have a presentation from QOTS, Champaign-Urbana Urbanized Area Transportation Study. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Halverson, and I'm a transportation planner with the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. And tonight I will be presenting to the council the Champaign, Urbana, Savoy, Bonneville Urbanized Area Long-Range Transportation Plan. So just to give you all a brief overview of what exactly the Long-Range Transportation Plan is, it's a detailed document that has to be updated every 5 years by us at QOTS and the RPC. And it basically details how the local transportation system is going to evolve over the next 25 years. And with this plan, we're not only looking at how automobiles and the roadway network will evolve, but we're also looking at how the bicycle, the pedestrian, truck traffic, the airport and air traffic, and rail traffic, and of course the transit traffic with the buses will also evolve over the next 25 years. As I said, the LRTP encompasses Champaign, Urbana, Savoy, and Bonneville, which is otherwise known as the urbanized area. The urbanized area is an area encompassing those 4 communities that's delineated by the decennial census. So every 10 years, the U.S. Census Department delineates the urbanized area. And then we also look at another boundary, which we call the Metropolitan Planning Area boundary, which basically looks at the next 25 years and where these communities may grow and how they may grow. So I have a map showing here. The area highlighted in blue is what we refer to as the urbanized area boundary. And for this particular plan, we are using the 2000 urbanized area boundary since the 2010 decennial census is just around the corner. This update happened to fall in between the 2 census time periods, so we end up using the 2000 boundary, and you can see that it encompasses Champaign, Urbana, Savoy, and Bonneville. It doesn't exactly capture all the new growth that's happened since the year 2000, but it's got a lot of it in there. The second boundary is the thicker black line that surrounds the urbanized area boundary, and this is what we call the 20 or 25 year planning boundary, or the Metropolitan Planning Area boundary. And we have this boundary on there just so we can actually encompass the growth that has taken place in Champaign, Urbana, and Savoy between, well, I guess since the year 2000, that's not incorporated into the urbanized area. So we're not only looking at the urbanized area, but we're also looking outside of the urbanized area and trying to figure out what's going to happen over the next 25 years. During each update of the LRTP, so every 5 years, we do come up with a mission statement that sort of summarizes a lot of the principles that you'll find in the plan and the document. This year's update and mission statement is to provide a safe, efficient, and economical transportation system that makes the best use of existing infrastructure, optimizes mobility, promotes environmental sensitivity and accessibility, promotes economic development, and enhances the quality of life for all of its users. I just wanted to briefly go over the planning process. We started this planning update process in January of 2009, and between January and April of 2009, we were working on the existing conditions, which basically highlights all of the existing land use and development patterns, the transportation network, and also environmental conditions in the urbanized area. In April of 2009, we held a series of 3 public workshops, one in Urbana, one in Champaign, and one in Savoy, basically to introduce the plan and the plan process to the public. Between April and September of 2009, we did a lot of work. We were able to formulate all of our goals and objectives. We worked on the future conditions, and we created a set of visions for the urbanized area out to the year 2035. And then also as part of this mandated document, we have to come up with future funding projections at the federal level, the state level, and the local level for all transportation funding that we might expect between the years 2009 and 2035 coming into the urbanized area. On October 1st, we held our second public meeting to introduce all of these topics. So everything basically relating to the future of the document and the future conditions, we introduced those to the public. And now between October and December, we're making presentations like this to all of our local agencies, all of our local governing bodies. The plan on October 26th went out for a mandatory 30-day public comment period, which ends on November 25th. And we're looking for final approval of the plan by the RPC commissioners and Coet's Tech and Policy committees in December. So as I mentioned before, we have held a series of public workshops and public meetings. We held 3 in April and 1 in October. We had about 90 people attend in total in all the 4 meetings. We received a lot of really great comment and feedback by the public who attended the meetings. And we actually take that input that we receive and we bring it back into the plan, and we formulate the goals and objectives from those comments and those suggestions. And we also use the comments as part of our future vision, which I'll be explaining in a minute. Just quickly, some of the most abundant comments that we received were to improve arterial streets and the various connections to interstates. A lot of people were excited about the possibility of high-speed rail coming to the urbanized area. A lot of people want to improve mass transit service and bike and pedestrian facilities. And they also are saying we need a more competitive airport in the urbanized area. So skipping ahead briefly, looking at the future conditions and out to the year 2035, where are we now? What we did for this particular plan is we created a land use and development vision for 2035. Then we created a transportation vision for the roadways, for bicycle and pedestrian networks, and then finally for public transit, rail, and air. We also ran our transportation model that we have at Coet's out to the year 2035 to kind of get a better idea of where we might see congestion and where we don't see congestion out to the year 2035. And then finally, we have goals, objectives, strategies, and measures of effectiveness, and then future funding projections. So moving on a little bit to the vision area of the plan, you may, some of you may recognize this map from the 2004 LRTP update. This was what we called at that point in time the preferred alternative. This map just highlights the progress that the urbanized area and our different agencies have made over the last 5 years between 2004 and 2009. The projects highlighted in green, such as the Curtis Road interchange at I-57, the transit routes that link our core to the fringe of our urbanized area, and also the Olympian Drive project between Madison and Apollo. They're highlighted in green to show that these projects have been complete and are now fully operational. The projects highlighted in yellow, such as the Windsor Road project between Philo Road and Illinois 130, for instance, these are projects that are currently underway and are scheduled to wrap up within the next year or so. The projects in red are projects that are left over from the 2004 preferred alternative, which were designated as major regional transportation projects. So you'll note some sections of Olympian Drive, Illinois 130, Florida Avenue, and then a couple sections along Curtis Road. These projects were in the plan in 2004, but have not yet received full funding and have not actually been started or completed at this time. Then there's 2 sections that are highlighted in blue. One is Rising Road and the other is Olympian Road and also High Cross Road on the Urbana side. During the 2004 preferred alternative and LRTP planning process, these 2 areas were listed as areas that needed to be further studied. A lot of residents in the area had concerns about how the roadway network may play out in the future. So Coet's was able to do 2 corridor studies, one along Illinois 130, and then one also along Staley and Rising Road in Champaign. And basically what came out of those 2 studies was that those roadways will be left as 2-lane arterials with possible pavement improvements and striping improvements, maybe even adding some improved shoulders to facilitate biking or sharing the road there. So you can see from this map that we actually have come a long way with regional projects over the last 5 years. So moving on to the visions, we created a land use and development vision, and we call it a vision for the region because this plan in its context is a regional plan. It's not city specific, it's not municipal specific, it's really the whole urbanized area region, so it's good to think about it from that standpoint. And our land use and development vision isn't meant to take over anyone's comp plan or take the place of any corridor studies. It's really about larger topics and larger ideas that everybody can kind of apply to development and land use across the region. So With that said, there's two major points as part of the vision. One is sustainable development, and one is looking at green infrastructure. And I'm sure, being on council and being in Urbana, you've heard a lot about these terms. You're applying these terms currently, so it shouldn't be anything new, but it's really important that we incorporated these into the LRTP. So in order to do that, we're looking at increasing infill and redevelopment in the core of our community, lessening the impacts of fringe development, focusing growth in specific nodes or specific areas of our communities where we can have a little bit higher intensity or higher density development, and then serve that with multimodal transportation options. So not only serving it by building parking lots, but making sure that we have transit connections and walking connections and bike connections to our new developments, especially in the core of our community. Looking at also at the cost of how the infrastructure will be built and what that's going to cost is important. And finally, looking at sustainable development. So how can we incorporate these new principles like green roofs, solar panels, wind energy, LEED design, LEED ND design, and also groundwater recharge into some of the new developments that may be coming into the urbanized area. Moving on to the transportation visions, as I said, we did create one for roadways, which relates to personal vehicles. So what we want to focus on first and foremost is reducing the vehicle miles traveled in the urbanized area. And once we are able to do that, we're going to try and improve mobility and connectivity between the different cities. Since this is an urbanized area regional plan, we want to look at how the different municipalities and cities connect to each other and how we can make those connections more efficient and to increase connectivity and mobility. And if we're able to increase the connectivity and reduce the VMT, then in turn we're obviously going to be reducing our greenhouse gas emissions through that. So we put together a vision map just to highlight some of the important regional projects that the LRTP is going to look at. And you'll recognize a lot of the projects in red are the roadway projects. You'll be happy to know that a majority of these projects, if not all of them, outside of the I-74 improvements, are slated to be complete streets in one fashion or another. You'll also notice there's two large orange bubbles, one in East Urbana and then one in Northwest Champaign. These are to really highlight possible interchange locations for the future with I-74. The bubbles encompass a really large area because at this time we don't know if or when or where those are going to come in, but we did want to put those in the plan just to highlight the possibility for those. And you'll see there's three sort of semicircles to the left of the plan and then one in the center. And those are possible future modern roundabout locations. There's two along Staley Road, one at Bradley and Staley and Champaign, and one at Windsor and Staley. Then the one in the center is at 4th Street and St. Mary's Road. Modern roundabouts are great for safety. They can handle a lot of traffic, and they also are able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You'll know that at some signalized intersections there's obviously a yellow and a red phase where cars have to stop, so therefore they're sitting there idling. But typically in modern roundabouts you'll have a yield sign instead of a stop or a signal, and you'll be able to continue through, and traffic flows a lot better in certain instances with modern roundabouts. So that's something we want to incorporate into the plan as well. As part of the LRTP and as part of our federal mandate, we do have to point out what we call fiscally constrained projects. Fiscally constrained is a term that we use to refer to projects that have guaranteed funding sources or reasonably guaranteed funding sources in the near future. So you'll see projects 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are highlighted in orange. These are projects that have not yet begun, but actually do have a reasonably guaranteed source of funding. So, for instance, project number 1 is the the Interstate 74 expansion project between Prospect Avenue and Champaign out to Illinois 47 in Mahomet. This was a project funded by the recently passed Illinois State Capital Bill. So it does have a reasonably guaranteed source of funding. Projects in green, projects 7, 8, and 9 are projects that are currently ongoing. Therefore, they do have funding and guaranteed funding since they're currently being constructed. This would refer to the Windsor Road project in Urbana, the Curtis Road improvement project in Champaign and Savoy. And then in the center, project 9 refers to the brand new high capacity routes that MTD recently put in place in the core of our community. So moving on to the bicycle and pedestrian vision for the future. We have some great plans in place already at the local level. Urbana already has a bicycle master plan for the city. Champaign has a similar plan for their city. We have the Champaign County Greenways and Trails Plan as well. So we want to, we don't want this plan to supersede those plans because they're great plans, but we want to make sure that we revisit those plans and update those plans, basically on a 5-year basis, because as we do construct bicycle facilities, we want to make sure that we take those off the plan or move them into the completed category and focus on new infrastructure that hasn't yet been built. We also have a need for a well-connected and efficient network that's safe for all users. Not everybody wants to ride directly on the street, and not everybody wants to ride off the street. So how can we have a seamless network and an efficient network that works for all different types of users? So your families and your recreational riders, but at the same time something that works for your bicycle commuters. It's also important to set aside money each year in the capital improvements program and in the budget for bike and pedestrian improvements and maintenance. We think that's a really important part of the plan. Urbana is already doing this in their CIP, but we'd like to see all the different municipalities and also maybe even the county do this as well. Safety and education is going to be important as we push forward. You'll probably notice with the 2010 census, we expect that the percentage of bike riders and walkers is probably going to go up from our 2000 census. So with more people biking and walking, and probably more people driving with more population, it's really important that we educate all the roadway users in how to properly share the road. That doesn't include just bikes and pedestrians, but it also includes drivers as well. And then finally, we want to continue to promote biking and walking as an alternative to driving. The cities are already doing great jobs doing that with the bike and walk to school days for the kids and parents. Also, bike-friendly community status is an ongoing thing with Champaign and Urbana. And then finally, biking to work day is something that some of our municipalities locally are also working on. So here's the map that we created for the bike and ped vision. It highlights 3 different project types. The projects in green are projects that are currently completed in Champaign, Urbana, and Savoy. Projects in yellow are currently ongoing, and then projects in red are projects which we believe, with the different municipalities' help, will be completed over the next 5 years. We chose for this vision map not to look all the way out to the year 2035 because we wanted to make it more realistic, especially with the projects that haven't been completed. So we basically used a 5-year time horizon, worked with Champaign staff, Urbana staff, and Savoy staff on figuring out what projects are most likely to be completed within the next 5 years. And we hope that when people look at this vision, it's a little bit more realistic than looking all the way out to 2035, and they'll be able to see sort of what projects are hopefully going to happen. And finally, we created a vision for local public transit, and in this case referring to bus transit. We want to see the current transit service area expanded to be coterminous with the urbanized area. We also want to see an increase in frequency for our transit service. And then finally, we want to see an increase in the availability and accessibility to the transit information that's put out there. We want to also, again, develop a seamless network for active transportation, and that basically refers to any non-automotive modes of transportation. So in this case, transit, biking, and walking, and creating a seamless network that allows people to go from their house to their place of employment or to a place where they might be shopping, and without having to always rely on using their personal vehicles. We also are looking at reducing greenhouse gases with our transit service. MTD has been replacing their existing buses with the hybrid buses. I'm sure you've seen the green and yellow buses on some of the routes around the urbanized area. Looking at establishing park and ride facilities, especially for those commuters who might be coming from outside the urbanized area. So if you work in Champaign County and maybe you're coming from Piatt County or from Vermilion County or rural Champaign County, coming to work at the university or the hospitals or any employer in the urbanized area, we want to get you to park on the outskirts of our urbanized area and then maybe take a bus or some kind of transit service into where you work, or maybe to where you want to shop, instead of always having to drive into the urbanized area or the core of the urbanized area, and adding more congestion to our roads. If we're able to park on the outside and carpool or take buses into the interior, it will hopefully reduce congestion. We also look to intercity public transit. There's a lot of public and private transportation that serves other cities and other regions of the country from Illinois Terminal or from the University of Illinois campus. This was something that surprised us when we actually sat down and looked at the number of intercity public transit and private transit providers. It's really quite impressive how many destinations we serve. For commercial trucks, one goal in the LRTP is to create a truck route map. So what that would do would be to keep commercial trucks off of our local streets as much as possible and relegate them out to the arterial streets where they probably belong. And that's really going to free up some of the congestion on our local roadways and keep trucks out of local neighborhoods and local areas and keep them out toward the exteriors. Finally, with rail, we're looking at the development of the high-speed rail connection between Champaign and Chicago and also St. Louis. Amtrak's always interested in increasing ridership and frequency on their routes that serve Illinois Terminal. And then we also are looking at creating a marketing campaign for Illinois Terminal, which will link Amtrak, the intercity transit system, and also CUMTD directly to Illinois Terminal. That's something that hasn't been explored yet, but we're putting it in the plan. A lot of people may not know that you can access all 3 transit services from one location. We think that's important to get out. Finally, looking at air travel, Willard Airport has been declining in the number of carriers that service the airport and also in the number of people who are using the airport. So I think it's important because Willard is a great regional asset for the urbanized area and also for the county and also especially for the University of Illinois and economic development purposes that we want to keep Willard a viable airport and a viable source of air travel for the urbanized area. So we put that in the plan as well. And finally, for the vision map, you can see the blue highlighted line is the high-speed rail corridor. Down to the southern end of the urbanized area, you'll see the Willard Airport highlighted. You also see the intercity public or private transit routes that are encompassing the urbanized area on some of our interstates. In the middle, project number 3 is the CAMP project, or the Core Area Mobility Project, that was put together by MTD in conjunction with the cities. And that's going to promote improvements for our multimodal connections and complete street connections in the core of our community as well. So we wanted to include that in this vision map. As I said before, we have a transportation model as part of the LRTP, and we run the model for our base year, which is the year 2005. And we also run 2 different scenarios, one for 2035 with no improvements. So if we take the 2009 transportation network, we don't make any improvements to it, what will congestion look like in the year 2035? And we also do 2035 with full improvements. So if we implement all the different projects that are listed in the LRTP and in the local CIPs, what will result from that in the year 2035 and how will congestion be mitigated through that? So what I'd like to point out here is that VMT has increased between 2005 and 2035, and of course that's expected with increases in population. You're obviously going to see more people driving. And also vehicle hours traveled increases. Of course, with more people driving, you'll see more vehicle hours traveled, more time people are spending in cars. But what you'll notice between no improvements and full improvements is that the number of vehicle hours traveled has gone down, albeit not by a ton, but it has gone down, showing that if we are able to do the full improvements, we will be able to make the transportation network more efficient and more connected between the different municipalities. Therefore, travel times will be reduced, and the amount of hours that people are spending in their vehicles will also be reduced. We did create a set of pretty detailed goals and objectives. I'll just go quickly through this. But we do goals and objectives, which are basically the end state brought about by implementing the LRTP. The objectives are sort of sub-goals that allow us to organize the different goals into manageable and measurable parts. We created strategies, which are more specific action items and measurable ways that we can implement the goals and objectives. Finally, something new that we added to the LRTP for this year was what we call measures of effectiveness, or sets of data that we can use to actually track positive or negative or neutral progress across the urbanized area over time. So the data sets measure back to the year 2004. They go to then 2009. And we look at the progress that the urbanized area has made in all different types of data. So we look at the amount of bicycle lanes that have been developed over 5 years. We look at the amount of land that's been developed over 5 years. We look at the Amtrak ridership over 5 years. And we want to track that over time. So in 2014, during our next update, we'll look back to the year 2009 and see how, what kind of progress toward the goals and objectives and strategies have we made over that 5-year period. And this is a great step for us because this is something that we haven't had, and it'll be interesting to see how we make progress over time. And then finally, what we have to do is future funding projections, and I just want to start off by stating that these are rough funding projections. A lot of it's based on 5-year averages, which I'll discuss in a second, but we do have to do it for federal, state, and local funding sources. One problem that we did have with this is that the current transportation bill at the federal level, which is called Safety Lou, expired in September the federal government was able to come up with a 1-month extension to Safety Lou to keep things going, and I believe right now it's between the House and the Senate on whether they're going to do another 1 or a 3 or a 6 or an 18-month extension. It's kind of up in the air. So it made it kind of tough for us, since this has expired, to do state and federal funding projections, since Safety Lou basically dictates how funding will come into the urbanized area. So for the federal funding projections, we do a 5-year average between fiscal year 2005 and fiscal year 2009, and we look at all the different federal funding that has come into the urbanized area over that 5-year period, and we did an average and then extrapolated that average out over the next 25 years between 2010 and 2035. This funding does exclude the stimulus money, since that is hopefully just a one-time injection into the local economy. And with the federal funding expected, we can see about $275 million over the next 25 years. For state funding, we do a similar average, but we look at the Transportation Improvement Program for the urbanized area. IDOT does a maintenance cost for all of Champaign County, so we grabbed out just the maintenance costs for the urbanized area. Then we also looked at the State Highway Improvement Program and the recently passed capital bill, and then we came up with a funding of about $92 million to the urbanized area over the next 25 years. Finally, we did local funding projections, and we worked in conjunction with local staff. So for Urbana, we worked with Bill Gray from Public Works to get the local agency expectations for transportation funding. So for the City of Champaign, City of Urbana, Village of Savoy, and Champaign County, we're looking at about $830 million, and that covers not only capital improvements but operation and maintenance to the existing system. For the University of Illinois, we looked at fiscal years 2010 to 2035, and to 2013, and this was really we didn't go all the way out to 2035 because the U of I's budget kind of fluctuates from year to year, and it's difficult to say what their expenditures for transportation are going to be at any given point in time. So we were able to get a pretty good handle on the next 4 years, so that's about $1.6 million. For CUMTD, Bill Volk gave us a projection of about $1.4 billion. This also includes not only operation maintenance and capital improvements, but it also includes their entire budget. So the number is a little bit high compared to the local agency number, but it also includes things like staff salaries and other different costs that weren't factored into the different cities and villages' costs. For Willard Airport, there's about $75 million over the next 25 years. And then there is some private funding that we found through grants or through developer-funded projects of about $14 million. So in total, over the next 25 years for local funding, we could expect to see a potential of about $2.3 billion in transportation funding. So just to go over our next steps, as I mentioned before, the plan is posted for a 30-day public comment period, and we do encourage people to either go online to our website at the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission or the City of Urbana or the City of Champaign. It's linked on all the different websites. The plan is also in printed version here at the City of Urbana, at Champaign, at Savoy, at the MTD building, and also at the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission building, also at the Champaign and Urbana Public Library. So you can actually review a hard copy if your internet access isn't that good or you actually want to look at a physical copy. And we'll be taking comments up through November 25th. And also we're presenting the plans currently at all the different local governing agencies. So I will be happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you very much, Eric. Brandon Bowersox.
Yeah, a couple questions. I'll start with the simple, easy one. With the MTD number, can you get the number that's an apples-to-apples comparison? It's kind of unfair to the MTD. If we're not putting our staff costs in there, they shouldn't have theirs in there either, just so we can see apples-to-apples. One of the top goals for vehicles, like single occupancy vehicles, was reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled. But I'm wondering how the plan envisions us doing that. From the numbers, as I briefly looked at them, I know when we get to 2035, it looked like the population estimate was increased. Our population would go up 48%. But over that same time, the estimate was that our VMT, our vehicle miles traveled, would go up 84%. So if our plan and our goal and these new sustainability values, which I really think are right, says that we want to reduce VMT, I guess how is it that our projection shows that it's going to go up, twice as quickly as population, and what interventions can we take to actually get to our goal of reducing VMT rather than ballooning it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Two things. First off, I probably should have mentioned, as part of the current MTD project, which is called My Plan, we have a small part in that, and that is to run the transportation model as part of that project for the urbanized area. Part of that project is also going to supply us with a mode choice model, which we can take this mode choice component, attach it to our current travel demand model, and it will accurately, or more accurately, predict the future for transit travel, bicycle travel, and pedestrian travel in the urbanized area, as well as our current automobile model. Right now, and for this particular plan, the LRTP, we weren't able to have that model completed. But it is our belief that the number of VMT that was shown in that table for the year 2035 with full improvements will decrease below the no improvement level for 2035 in terms of VMT, because we're not currently accurately looking at bicycle, pedestrian, and transit travel in the urbanized area for the future. We delayed this planning process for the LRTP as long as we possibly could, because that model was supposed to be ready a while ago, and we're still working on it. We expect, as soon as we get the mode choice model linked to our current model, to actually do an update to this plan in order to incorporate the new findings that are going to come out of that model. So that's one. And number two, the way that the future of the roadway projects is set up is that a lot of the regional projects, this really focuses on the region as a whole, and kind of leaves the local projects to the local agencies. And you'll see that the major arterials surrounding Champaign, Urbana, and Savoy are the ones that are slated for improvement. With that, you're going to see people maybe coming from southwest Champaign to get to northeast Urbana are no longer going to take maybe the most direct route that might be the shortest in terms of miles, which may go through the core of the urbanized area, because right now some of the roads aren't fully improved. Maybe people don't feel comfortable driving on a section of Curtis Road that's rural, but they want to go through, maybe say take Windsor or Springfield or University Avenue to go from Champaign to Urbana or vice versa. When these are with our projections and predictions that when these are all improved, people are most likely going to take the fastest route, maybe not the shortest route. So that's why you might see a slight increase in VMT over the 25-year period. But when you look at the actual hours traveled, that will actually reduce. So it's not only the miles traveled, but if we look at the amount of time people are spending and the amount of time cars are actually running on the network, we might actually see some emissions reductions. So.
Yeah, I think having the MTD updated model, and maybe even on a table like that showing the travel times reduced, at least helps. I guess I still in general would say, and I can put some of these suggestions in writing too, so I can be officially part of the 30-day comment period, but that I really would love to see the LRTP document be even more so a roadmap of how we can get to that sustainable future where there's less VMT. And, if that takes interventions, if that takes prioritizing a higher capacity transit system or providing people more alternatives, then so be it. Let's see what it would take to get there. But we should envision how to really get to that fewer VMT goal that we want to get to. That's just kind of general comment. Sure. As you go forward and prioritize things. And on a related question, are any of the agencies doing these LRTPs doing a fix-it-first kind of mentality? I know with things like the I-35 bridge collapse in Minneapolis, people, and with dwindling dollars, dwindling motor fuel tax revenue, a lot of governmental entities are saying, okay, whoa, it's really time that we put money into maintaining what we've already got before building out, because it's not sustainable where we're not going to in 10 years be able to afford to keep repairing all these things that we've built. Is that fix-it-first mentality something that you're seeing in this LRTP process or in other jurisdictions and in the thinking?
Mm-hmm. As in local jurisdictions? Or
yeah, in like our other agencies that are doing this kind of planning, or in our LRTP here in this district, taking into account that kind of shift in priorities to do fixes and to do maintenance and make sure we can afford to do that before we do improvements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think there's two parts to this LRTP. The LRTP is an important document for the urbanized area because it's, number one, it's a federally mandated document by FHWA, so we have to do it every 5 years as the MPO for the urbanized area. So that's one. And two, as part of it, we have to look at it at the more regional level, like I said before, and point out the regional projects, because if funding does become available at the federal or the state level, especially at the federal level, they tend to look, FHWA tends to look to the MPOs or the urbanized areas LRTP to see if these projects are actually prioritized or highlighted in this document. So that's why we tend to look at it as a more large-scale regional, projects that have large-scale and regional effect, rather than repaving Windsor Road or something like that. We tend to leave that more toward the city of Urbana or the city of Champaign or wherever may have jurisdiction over the local roadways. In terms of other LRTPs, I would like to say that Rita Black, our Planning and Community Development Director at RPC, is actually in Washington, D.C. this week. That's why she couldn't be here tonight. She is there on behalf of all small to medium-sized MPOs across the entire country, because our LRTP from 2004 was selected as one of the top in the country. So hopefully that will put everyone at ease that we're trying to get on the right track with this, and the federal government does recognize that we are doing, or at least trying to do, some good things for the urbanized area. I hope that answers your question.
Last question's an easy one. With the roundabout consideration, did you look at all intersections or all intersections above a certain number of ADT, or just intersections where there were other projects happening? I mean, I can think of a couple intersections like Windsor and Race where I've wondered in my mind, well, gee, we haven't put a signal there yet, but we'd like to someday. Should we consider an alternative or a roundabout? But I wonder, how much did you go around town hunting for possible roundabout locations?
Yeah. The three that were shown in there actually come out of corridor study recommendations that RPC did in conjunction with the St. Mary's Road corridor study, which some of you may remember from a couple of months ago. And what came out of that was to look at the possibility of putting one at 4th and St. Mary's. Then the two over in Champaign came out of the Staley and Rising corridor study. We didn't actually go through and look at intersection by intersection to analyze if it was a possibility of roundabout. I mean, that would take an exorbitant amount of time. That's something, again, that we should really leave to the localities to figure out if you have enough right-of-way, if you have the money to do it, if it's a good location. I mean, modern roundabouts are great, and we're in favor of them. I know the city's in favor of them as well, but they don't work at every single intersection. So for this plan to say that it should go at every single intersection is really not feasible. So we kind of left it as this is a transportation improvement idea or technology, however you want to see it, that should be looked at if a signalized intersection is warranted. Look at a signal and look at a modern roundabout and see which one fits better, see which one is more cost effective, see which one might be safer. So that's kind of the way that the LRTP discusses modern roundabouts.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, where did the population increases estimates come from? Are they the same as like the past 10 or 20 years, or how did you get those?
During the 2004 LRTP update, which I wasn't a part of CUATS at that particular time, but Rita was, and what they did was they met with all the municipalities and the university who were all involved in the LRTP. They actually went, what we break it down to for transportation planning is a traffic analysis zone. And they went by traffic analysis zone in every single municipality throughout the urbanized area, sat down with I believe, planning staff at each agency, and went TAS by TAS and projected out what the future development may be, TAS by TAS. And same with employment, they did the exact same thing. So how much development may go into this particular TAS, how much development may we expect in this particular TAS, and that's how the projections were completed. As we went through and did various corridor studies over the last 5 years, there were a number that we did for Urbana and also for Champaign. We were constantly updating those projections as well as we looked at redevelopment in some of those corridors and things. Obviously, population and employment we would expect to go up with redevelopment and things. So that's kind of how we came to that.
So is it different from past trends in population growth?
All I could say is that it is higher than what we had in 2004, but only slightly, I believe.
Okay. The other question I noticed on your high-speed rail, you had a blue line, and it was coming from Chicago, and then all of a sudden it went due west. So what is that?
We have conflicting ideas on which way it goes, whether it goes straight south from Illinois Terminal and then hits, I believe, Effingham and then goes across, or there's one that goes across and down over to Springfield. So we are still looking into that, but look for an adjustment on that in the final plan.
Okay. Diane?
I have a question about the existing conditions findings. One of your statements was land development patterns between 2004 and 2009 have shown lower densities and expanding land areas. So that sounds like sprawl, right?
Part of that could be attributed to sprawl in certain communities. I could say for Urbana, it would be important to look at the number of annexations from existing county development into the city of Urbana, also the annexation of the Frasca Airport over that period of time between 2000 and this current update. So those numbers may be slightly skewed, especially for the city of Urbana, but for other municipalities, it may or may not be sprawl.
Okay. Well, my question is, if it is sprawl, it's at odds with the goal of compact development, and presumably that was your goal in 2004, and we've not seen that in the 5 years since then. So how does this 2009 plan differ from this, what you're doing in 2004 to try to address this problem?
Again, this is a regional plan for the urbanized area, and it's not meant to take over any local comprehensive planning or any local planning jurisdictions for either cities or the village of Savoy. You know, the plan is hopefully to address some of the larger issues such as sprawl, but the plan doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction over the city of Urbana, and the plan, you know, there's no sticks in the plan that say you absolutely have to develop more compact, or you know, you can't approve or develop subdivisions on the outskirts of your community. Unfortunately, we don't have that power with this plan. All we can do is suggest new and better ways of developing in our municipalities and within the urbanized area.
Why is Bonneville included in this? We were just talking about this. It just seems like way over there.
Yeah, it is quite far west from Champaign. I'm not really 100% sure why it was included in the 2000 urbanized area boundary, but the Census Bureau has a certain formula that they use based on contiguous development. It's also based on population densities and growth areas and things. So I don't have a surefire answer as to why Bonneville was included, but it was. Therefore, we have to include it in the plan.
Dennis Roberts?
I had a couple of things that came to my mind as you were making your presentation. One of them, Brandon actually sort of mentioned already, and that was the proposed roundabout locations. Two of them have come out of corridor studies, apparently, or suggestions. Is there any reason why more can't be induced into the program to make effectiveness? You did say that that it was basically a municipal question, whether during the planning state the cost of a roundabout versus the cost of a signal was something that the city could take into consideration. So, but a lot of the planning has to do with federal funding, and you know, it's a larger plan. It's county funds are part of this decision making too. So I'm wondering if I guess I would have imagined there could have been like about twice as many locations that had been designated as potential roundabout construction sites, and I'm wondering why you were so hesitant about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess as part of those two corridor studies, we actually did an analysis to see if a single lane roundabout would be a better option rather than putting a signalized intersection in. So we actually did modeling at the regional level and at the ground level in those corridor studies, and we were able to definitively say as part of those studies that yes, these were most likely good areas or good intersections for future roundabouts. And like I mentioned with Mr. Bowersox, it would be difficult and probably very cumbersome as part of this plan to look at all the intersections in Savoy, Champaign, and Urbana to try to figure out exactly what intersections would be good for roundabouts and ones which aren't. I'm sure as public works staff will go on, and I'm sure there's going to be instances where signalized intersections might be warranted. I'm sure that they're going to look at other options other than signalized intersections. So we hope to look to our municipal partners for help on that.
It's also part of your duty to plan for the outgrowth on the peripheral of the areas of the city, and so the development of Olympian Drive and that kind of ring corridor transportation route, which has been somewhat contested by some people, is on your plan, and also potential interstate locations on I-74 east of Urbana and east of High Cross Road. And again, these are like in line of what Diane Marlin was saying. To put these on the map, by naming it, they become real, and there's an expectation then that we'll be evolving and developing in this area. You're predicting that we will, so you have to plan ahead. But again, the contention of it's smarter to have infill development and think about the planning a denser kind of population growth rather than a more sprawled one is sort of countermanded by the fact that these are appearing on the map, and once the plan is adopted, can be referred to constantly as expected development and potential development. So I kind of feel like it does set the stage for thinking in a manner that increases urban sprawl rather than diminishes it. If they weren't on the map, if it wasn't part of your plan or the unit, the county's plan or the corporate plan to develop in those areas, it'd be interesting to find out if you would actually make comments saying that it's not encouraged to enact these at this time. But you don't make those kinds of judgments. These are things that you do not. You're remaining neutral. This is a neutral projection. Is that right?
For future growth?
Yeah.
In those areas? I think, again, we would, looking at this plan as what it should do, and that's pointing out the regionally significant projects which will help the cities in the urbanized area obtain future funding should those projects become a high priority. So, for instance, Olympian Drive has been designated as a high priority. Mm-hmm. So labeling it on here will only help the cities and the county obtain funding for a project such as that. Looking at, for instance, the interchange in East Urbana, this is something I believe Urbana has been looking at for some time now, and I think it's important that we put it on the plan to let people, know in that area that in the future there could be something there. We're not saying that there definitely will be or will not be, but I think it's important to not hide the fact that something like that could happen.
I accept that because I attended some of the planning, meetings that looked at various potential locations for future interchanges on the east side. Okay, I just am aware though that it's something that we're very concerned about, and it seems like we're kind of encouraging it by enhancing the potential for funding, designations there. Mm-hmm. I've got one more question, and that's about the airport. The airport has had diminished use. There have been plans put into effect to partner with different airlines that have worked to some degree and maybe not, and others. The concern for the airport is that it's not as competitive as other regional airports. Do you make any progress or prediction on the viability and what the challenges are for changing that?
Mm-hmm. We did have some discussions with some representatives from the university who do deal with the airport. Mm-hmm. What exactly some of the challenges are, I think it's hard to say. They may say one thing, and maybe the Village of Savoy or the county or the cities may say another. Mm-hmm. A lot of people want to blame the parking fee on it, and that's why people go to Bloomington, because it's free parking. But in reality, that may not be the sole reason why people aren't using it. Maybe it's that it costs $300 to fly out of Willard, where it might only cost you $200 to fly out of Bloomington, so it's worthwhile to drive the 40 minutes to Bloomington. I think some of the issues that were brought up, I believe at one of our public meetings that we recently had, was the airlines fix the costs of flights out of certain airports, and the fixed cost out of Willard, it's not a regional hub as they might delineate it, Therefore, they're going to have higher costs because there's fewer people served and things like that. So that could also be another issue. But in working with the airport, and if you look more closely at the plan, there are goals and objectives and strategies on how to possibly increase employments over time at the airport or increase carriers there. And those were provided to us by the university staff who does work with Willard Airport.
You said that there was 30 days to comment on it, and there's a website. How will the comments that people make that you're encouraging be incorporated into your future development of the plan?
We'll have a pretty short turnaround by the end of the 30-day public comment period, so we'll really look for those comments that specifically stand out. So if we receive a number of comments on one specific issue, I think that's going to force us to go back and look at whatever segment of the plan the comments pertain to. But all the comments, just for everyone's information, all the comments will be photocopied. The names are always blacked out, and then they're put right into the public participation appendix that we append into the plan. So all the comments are available once the plan is actually printed and distributed and put online. All the comments from anyone who's ever made comments throughout the entire planning process are available for people to read and look at. So
Thank you.
Okay, Libby, Tyler.
I wanted to just pick up on some of the questions about future land use planning, and just to verify and confirm that the LRTP is entirely consistent with the land use projections in our comprehensive plan. So those won't be changed. When you look at the comprehensive plan, which I know you're all very familiar with, there's a mobility map, and so that's Appendix D, and there's land uses designated. So LRTP takes those up. There's no deviations. The TASs that Eric mentioned are based on our land use designations, so there's no change in those intensities. And when we talk about compact contiguous growth patterns, those would still be as shown in the future land use map. Some of the data in terms of acreage in the urbanized area does reflect annexations in Urbana, not development, but annexations of rural areas, which we had a lot of activity since 2000, a lot of annexations. So our density numbers are lower. That's not, in Urbana's case, it's not due to sprawl, it's due to annexation, and Eric and I have discussed that. So I just wanted to confirm that we do have consistency with the Urbana's comprehensive plan and with this LRTP, and working very close to ensure that. And Tom tells me there is a new committee formed at the EDC to look at the airport site. He might have more information about that.
Would you please tell everyone what a TAS is?
sure.
It's a cartoon character? No.
It's
Tasmanian devil.
Traffic area zone?
it's a traffic analysis zone.
Okay.
Traffic analysis zone. Okay, thank you. Charlie?
I have enough to keep us here for another 2 hours, which I'm sure nobody would like me to do. So what I'd like to know is how I can submit my questions to you and get answers.
Absolutely.
Just email them to you and
You can
Rita.
email them directly to me. I'm sort of in charge of taking all the comments for the plan.
Okay, well, I have more questions than I have comments.
Sure. But yeah, we take everything, questions, comments.
So let me ask some of my basic ones here. What happens if we, as a city council, reject the plan?
That I don't know. Yeah.
Well, what assumptions do you make for fuel and energy costs in your projections, in your modeling?
In the modeling, we're unable at this time with our particular model to make any assumptions about the actual cost of fuel, if that's what you're referring to for the future. I'm sure that we all are well aware that the cost of fuel is most likely going to increase. I think we saw quite a bit of a shock a year or so ago, and what happened with VMT across the entire country. VMT went down for the first time in a long time. And if fuel prices do increase, then we may see different projections than what was shown today. And again,
Then how can we trust the model if it can't take into account accurate estimate? Everybody expects fuel costs to go up. And if the model doesn't take that into account, then how can we, trust any of the predictions of the model?
I think that you have to take it for what it is, and it is a model, and these are projections and not predictions.
Well, one of the things that I think is lacking in the whole plan is the lack of quantitativeness. There are just, point after point where things are just sort of glossed over. Let me just read you a section here where there's just no quantitative. I can find my notes here. Page 31, for example, of the plan. At the very last sentence, both Champaign and Urbana have seen a considerable increase in infill and mixed-use development. There's some tables given. Nowhere does it say what the actual number, you make the statement, but there's no quantification of it. Yet on page 26, 2.4, you use the word sprawl. And Diane alluded to it earlier. And you've got your thumbs up, thumbs down stuff, which I think is pretty tacky in a technical plan like this. And in there, you basically, it's thumbs down on the density issue and how we've sprawled. If in fact Urbana is different from Champaign, it's different from other places, then we need to see actual numbers. Say, okay, well, no, this is what's really going on. You've annexed all this rural area. And, so we need to know why it's not sprawl and it's something else. And the only way you're going to see it is to show me the numbers. Okay, so I got 3 more basic questions here. Can you tell me the history of roads that have been built because of the LRTP based on past plans versus maintenance of existing system?
Probably not off the top of my head. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that.
Because the money comes in for everything, right? It's money for the transit. It's money for everything that's spent in the whole area, right? So there's no breakdown of maintenance versus new roads, and that I think that's another quantitative piece that I think would sort of get us a good piece of information. Now, if we're really doing sprawl, then we're building more roads and maintaining less. And to me, what I see this, if you go back in the history to 1962 when this thing came forward, this is just a program to build roads. It's justification to build roads and more roads. Okay, that may or may not be a good thing. I think in today's world, it's a bad thing to just be building roads without really good justification. Yet all through this document it talks about sustainability and green this and green that. Yet you look at what they want to do, they want to build a ring road. That concept is still in there from the 1970s. You just see it everywhere. Curtis Road is in red, and it's got this big area where the university doesn't want to do anything. Okay, Windsor is our 4-lane road across that area. You still see people trying to get a north-south access north of the interstate on High Cross Road. Maybe, maybe not. Olympian Drive is it's a mile and a half from where there's anything else really going on. Is it really needed that far out? You can ask these things, but we know from past experience that if you build the road far away, people are going to move there, and people are going to start using it, and you increase sprawl. And so unless you show me, how we've used the federal monies for maintenance versus justifiably building new roads, I can't say whether this plan encourages sprawl or not. So, you talk about park and ride. I've seen park and ride facilities every time I've gone by them going northward. Do park and ride facilities really work?
When used in the right context, absolutely. But unfortunately, so far in the urbanized area, we don't have any yet. So it's hard to tell how they will or will not work in the urbanized area.
Well, we do have one. We have the university parking lot next to the stadium.
Yes.
It's a park and ride. There's a place you can check it. Okay, let me just add one more question here, and then I'll let Bill make his comment. On page 77, you talk about future services that are needed. There's no explanation of what those future services are. I do agree that we should have a truck route system. On table 5, figure 5.9, you could update the bus ridership if the numbers are so computerized then in the final plan, I would hope that you have the very latest numbers, not stopping in May 2009. And then my last big comment is, you talk about 11% increase in vehicles between 2004 and 2009. You attribute 4% to passenger vehicles, leaving 7% out there for trucks and trucks and motorcycles. No breakdown. What's trucks? What are motorcycles? And can you tease out SUVs that are classified as trucks in that number? So those are the general things I have to say, and I've got a lot more, but I'll submit them.
Bill Gray.
Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the main reasons for the long-range transportation plan update is it's a Federal Highway Administration requirement, and it's a requirement in order for us to receive federal funding. Okay, that's the bottom line. Federal dollars that we receive through CUATS, that are administered through CUATS, really don't go for maintenance. They go for reconstruction or new roads. Maintenance dollars are local dollars, sometimes state dollars, but the huge exception to some degree is the stimulus money we received. I mean, you could argue that went for maintenance or went for new construction, but really the federal dollars, the $1 million we get a year to CUATS, is for new construction. And we know what they are over the last 20 years. It's essentially been, Windsor Road, Curtis, we had some money on 50 Road. Lincoln in Florida, we had some money. Lincoln Avenue south of Florida, we had some money. I mean, folks, over the last 20 years, that's where the federal dollars have gone. It's for new construction. So
that's exactly my point. I mean, this is a program that brings money in from the federal government to build new roads.
Right.
Okay, it encourages sprawl. It's made to just build new. You're not going to build a new road where there's already a road.
I'm not going to argue that. All I'm saying is you asked about maintenance, and I want to clarify it doesn't go towards maintenance.
Yeah,
okay.
It's exactly. That's exactly what I wanted to know. It doesn't go towards maintenance, and which is what we really need to do. We've got all these roads out here that are 20 years behind the times and getting fixed up, and instead we're getting federal money to build new roads.
Yeah, that's throughout the United States. So
the federal government has it backwards.
Secondly, you asked what happens if the city council rejects it, this plan, and I guess we, the MPO, CUATS, are, commissioned, if you will, to provide the feds ultimately a long-range transportation plan, okay? And how that happens is that at some point the draft plan will go to the CUATS technical committee. Technical committee is essentially staff people within the members of CUATS, and at some point there's a recommendation made to approve or not approve or approve with changes to the policy committee. The mayor is our policy member. Every agency has a representative, and there's a vote taken, vote up or down, the policy members vote for the plan. And then, you need a majority vote, and then the plan, if there's a majority vote in favor of the plan as the final draft is, and that's what's sent on to the feds. So I don't know, in the 20 years that I'm aware of the 5 or so plans I've been involved with, if they've ever, I know they've never said no. The policy members, there's always been a majority vote, or probably most often a unanimous vote to send the plan as final drafted, to the state and to the feds. But to answer that question, if the mayor so chooses, she could vote no, for example. The other 5 members could vote yes. It's a 5-to-1 vote, and it goes forward, whatever. But remember, you've got other members.
The policy.
I'm just saying, you asked what happens, and that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, the way it's set up is it's not by population or anything like that. It's 2 votes per each of the 3 cities involved here. When I think 1 vote each. Okay, 1 vote each. I guess the other committee has 2 members. The other committee, the technical committee, has 2 each. Yeah. So it's not weighed by population or anything like that. It's just a straight vote. And the issue here is that, if we really wanted a jobs program, if we really wanted to put our folks to work, we would be rebuilding the existing roads that we have. We would get a lot more bang for our buck, and probably could spend a lot more money in a more efficient way than building new roads. And I think that's. I'm sorry, Eric, you're the messenger, and I shouldn't be shooting you. But that my issue here is with the whole philosophy of this thing that has gone on since the 1960s, which is build roads, build more roads.
I think just a final comment, and I'm not arguing one way or another with your comments, but keep in mind, number one is that we have an excellent plan in the past, and the draft before you is an excellent plan, okay? But you're suggesting fundamentally far different shift of how the federal government has dictated how these plans should go. I'm not saying it's wrong, and I think there needs to be a shift, but I'm just saying the procedures, the processes, as Eric outlined tonight, in short detail, is exactly, we're not making this stuff up, folks, okay? I mean, Eric isn't, hey, this is my plan. No, we're following pretty much fairly rigid guidelines and procedures. No, I'm anxious, as everybody is, as to Rita's visit to D.C. and what may happen in the future, because I think we are a leader in many ways, especially at the small to medium-sized MPO areas. And these are issues that have come up tonight that some of you have raised that I think need to be factored into future plans. But right now, we're working with the set of rules, if you will.
If we want the federal money,
Okay,
we got to play by their rules.
Precisely.
Let's have
Yeah.
people be called on by the chair, please.
Right.
As the chair, I would like to say that if we're going to come to grips with sustainability and climate change, we're going to have to say, where's the money going to come from? And if we want mass transit and we want high-speed rail, we might have to shift money from highways. It'll be like that. Dennis?
And, mentioning high-speed rail and desires of having a different kind of technology to move around within our own community, if the community wanted to pursue, an interurban electric trolley system to be incorporated into the new mass transit plan for the city of Urbana, Champaign, Savoy, and Bond, how would this plan doesn't address even the idea of creating such a mobility template for the community, and so it's completely left out of planning in general. And is this not the place that we could encourage or begin to formulate studies for such planning materials? Or I think there should be some conversation about preferred new kind of templates for mobility in the community. And if this is a place where we are expressing our needs and our expectations for development, looking for transportation dollars from the federal government, we should be including alternative technology development as well, if the community supports it.
Well, I would argue just those exact comments are comments that should be made during this comment period. Mm-hmm. And if there's enough comments identical or similar to what you're making, then that's going to grab some momentum and mass, and then perhaps we individually or we collectively, the cities that is, need to look at or study or commission something like that.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping the cities
Right.
from doing their own plans. He's just compiling what the existing plans are. There's nothing wrong with us talking with Champaign and Savoy and Bonneville or whoever we want to talk to and see what we should ask our congressional representatives to do.
It should be starting to show up on these plans.
Sure. No, we can't do it on the plans because we have to get the rules changed at the federal level. Okay, any other questions on this? Who is first? I think David might have been first. Robert Myers, go ahead.
A couple of things. One, excuse me. One is that the plan does reflect the comprehensive plan. An element of the comprehensive plan, there's a lot of elements of the comprehensive plan, including land use and transportation, public facilities, et cetera. The comprehensive plan includes bikeways, but also includes arterial roads and arterial streets. And admittedly, that's a very expensive element or piece of the transportation system, are these new roadways. Many times federal funding is required or it wouldn't happen. The long-range transportation plan, in my mind, essentially reflects a lot of the plans that have already been composed over the several number of years. For instance, in the roundabouts, that's reflected from St. Mary's Road Plan, Olympian Drive is reflected in our own comprehensive plan. A lot of these arterial roadways, this is a plan out to 2035, and these large arterial roads take years to work on. And if you look at communities and metropolitan areas that have failed to actually plan for and put in arterial roads into place, as difficult as they are and as expensive as they are, it has a long-term detrimental impact on the entire region, or it can. And I've seen many metropolitan areas where, for whatever reason, they didn't have the fortitude. They've got two arterial streets and they don't connect, and they just stop right there. And it has had a real impact on the transportation and the economy of the area. So it does. I think the long-range transportation plan does focus a lot on the major roadways for different reasons. One is that Federal Highway Administration, this is our plan, but it's also in part is their plan too. I understand, they dictate that it's going to be written in such a way. You're going to do a model. You're going to run the model like this. It's going to be through these years, et cetera. So it is a planning exercise that has long-term implications, and admittedly, it's hard to see in a crystal ball that far out in terms of planning and development. But everyone's doing our best with very sophisticated models and with very good judgment, I think, and advice from staff members. The last thing I would mention, thank you for your patience here, is that in the United States, there's not really regional land use planning. There's regional transportation planning, but not regional land use planning by and large. Now, there's a few exceptions to that. There's some that goes on in Portland area and other places. And so really the plan addresses transportation, but it really has the land use decisions are made at the local levels, local jurisdictions. So this regional land use plan and CUAS doesn't have any control to say, Champaign, you must do it this way, Urbana, your land use must be like this. It's really contingent upon us to grow responsibly, and it's contingent upon the other communities who are in the same boat as we are to grow responsibly. And then hopefully the long-range transportation plan reflects all of our best plans, including land use and transportation needs, in our own comprehensive plan.
David?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple of times we've heard about we're in the 30-day comment period, and you said that it should be possible to comment through the website. Could you give us the URL for the planning document and how to comment, email address for comments?
Sure, absolutely. If you go to www.ccrpc, which is Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, .org, there's a link right on our homepage to the LRTP document itself, where you can download a PDF version of the document. It's broken out into chapters just in case, because the whole document is kind of large. But if you want to download the entire thing, it's there too. On that website, there is a comment button on the left-hand side, you'll see, and you can type in comments. When you submit those, they get emailed directly to me. If you want to email me directly, my email is EHAL, V as in Victor, ORS, @ccrpc.org. You can call me at 328-3313. You can write us a letter, courtesy of Eric Halverson. I'll take comments just about any way that people want to give them. So.
And the comment period closes when?
November 25th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brandon?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of mention one final thought. Eric, I appreciate you coming and answering all these hard questions. I think what you've heard is that this plan comes sort of with us thinking about sustainability and thinking about all these other goals and how this fits into that bigger picture, and sort of the tension between the directives we've been given about how to create this LRTP. We're looking at, with carbon emission reduction, how to drop by 2030 40%, by 2040 60%, and then by 2050 80% drop in our greenhouse gas emissions. And yet at the same time, then it's scary to look at a plan like this that might be projecting an 84% increase in our vehicle miles traveled. And it's like, wait, how can we be driving so much more our children are going to be driving so much more in this town, 80% more than we are, and yet somehow they've got to figure out a way to emit 80% less than we are. And so it's those sorts of divergent goals that make this a little tricky. I absolutely understand that we have to do this plan the way the federal government sets out. And we've all heard of no child left behind. In some ways, I kind of think of this plan as no road left behind, in that you have to put in every road that we might reasonably want, that any of these jurisdictions might reasonably want to get federal funding for, because if you leave a road behind and then in these next 5 years funding comes along, or an opportunity or a business or growth or an annexation, we want help building the road, we can't get it if it's not in the plan. So that's kind of a funny perspective to come from when we're thinking about sustainability, but that's absolutely the directive you've been given to write this document. So I understand that, and I think that as Urbana, the things it seems like we can do to promote the sustainable transportation network that we want are to continue to prioritize density, prioritize compact development, prioritize, connecting the urban core with Campus Town and Champaign and having dense development be encouraged there, building out our bike and ped network and continuing to promote safety campaigns in the whole community, encouraging things like the high-capacity transit system or high-speed rail, so that if gas gets back to $4, I know it's been rising again this week, but if it gets to $4, if it gets to $5, that we have some other way to get to school and work and the grocery store, that we have alternatives, and that by the time that happens, we've got a transportation system that gives us more choices. And a lot of those are things I think that we do, and that the LRTP and this exact process with the feds that we go through doesn't really get us towards, but that a lot of our other planning has to continue to be geared towards. So that's my feeling about it. Thank you for letting us grill you with questions. I will submit some more of this in writing, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill Gray.
Well, in many respects, this LRTP is our wake-up call. Okay, vehicle miles traveled are going to increase. Well, if the basic, whether it's comp plans, gas taxes or lack thereof, or whatever plans that we locally would like to incorporate, what we currently are doing is reflective in this plan. If we take some drastic measures otherwise, i.e. we're not going to annex anything, we're not going to grow, we're not going to issue building permits, I'm talking crazy, but the point is if that was the direction given to CUATS, well then you'd see drastically different numbers. So the point is, it is a wake-up call then, that if these are our goals in 2040, 50, what have you, then there are some significant policy decisions and other sorts of decisions we have to make to ratchet down to achieve those goals.
And I don't think we can assume that the vehicles are going to be the same, because they're going to be more fuel-efficient vehicles, so just the miles traveled may not translate into the same amount of greenhouse gas emissions.
And again, transportation is just a percentage of all the greenhouse gases
Right,
produced. So
right.
if we're all in
It's
hydrogen
mostly
fuel
buildings,
vehicles in
right.
30 years, maybe we reduce that number, but there's other, carbon emission situations too.
The vehicle miles
Charlie?
travel will increase because everybody will be on bicycle. What happens if we put emphasis on reconstructing a major road like University Avenue? Say we said that's our number one priority. Can federal money be directed to something like that?
Well, yeah, but I don't think we want our local federal dollars to do that. That's a state route. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
if
Well,
you're
I
talking
just
about a local route,
yeah.
sure,
I'm
we
trying to
could-
find an example. Okay, we pick a route that
Technically, CUATS policy committee, policy members, could choose federally aid urban routes in the city for federal dollar use, and that would include reconstruction, yes. So, and let's just assume it's a non-state route, but if you want to use Florida as an example, or Florida Kirby, we wanted to fix the stretch between Neal and Florida, Lincoln, excuse me, on Florida, okay, Kirby. Sure, those dollars could be used to reconstruct that street if we so chose. I mean, that would be an eligible expense. But again, policy from almost the inception of federal funding coming through CUATS has been towards,
New roads.
2 new roads, reconstruction and or widening of roads.
Well, I think it's interesting. We have two identified roads in Urbana that are congested. One of them is right out here between Illinois and Washington on Vine. And the other one is, and I find this one hard to believe because I go through there all the time and I don't find it congested, is Springfield between Goodwin and Lincoln. That one, I've seen this one get congested a bit, but I've not seen that other one, so I'm not sure. Maybe does it happen in the 5-minute rush minute? Oh, yeah. Is that when it happens, in the rush minute? Oh,
Drop
okay.
people off at the school, forget it.
That's when it happens, okay. I'm
Back
just
up
going at
for-
the wrong times. Okay, so we got 2 of those. It strikes me that, okay, if we take a look at all of our problem intersections and whatever, we start deciding, we say, let's fix those roads and make those our highest priorities to improve that, instead of building new roads, can we use federal money to do that? And what you're telling me is if Kuwats decides those are our top priorities, then we could.
Kuwats's decisions, and I can only reflect 20 years, has typically been on regional arterial roads, not necessarily a road or an improvement that favors just one community. It's always been the bigger picture. That's been where the federal dollars typically have been spent for what I would call regional arterials.
Well, I would argue that fixing all those congested, those 10 worst roads and the 10 worst intersections for Urbana and Champaign would improve connectivity north-south, east-west better than adding any kind of ring road. It would serve far more people.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is an appointment. I would like to appoint Kim Smith to the Historic Preservation Commission. I think she's very highly qualified.
Definitely.
So moved.
So, a second.
Okay, motion by Marlin, seconded by Smythe. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.